The room smelled faintly of lamp oil and fresh pine, and I could hear rain tapping against the bedroom window in slow, uneven drops. My wedding dress was folded over the back of a chair, my prayer covering was still pinned in place, and downstairs the last of the dishes were being put away. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed with my hands locked together so tightly that my fingers hurt. I had spent my whole life hearing small pieces of advice about marriage, but that night I realized how much had never been said plainly. What I had been taught was not one simple rule. It was a mixture of faith, duty, privacy, kindness, fear, and expectations that I had to sort through for myself. My name is Katie. I am an adult Amish woman, and I share these stories because life inside a plain community is often more complicated than people imagine from the outside. Some parts are beautiful, some are difficult. Most are both at once. If you have ever entered a marriage carrying advice you did not fully understand, tell me in the comments what you wish someone had explained more honestly. Before I was married, no one sat me down for one long conversation about what marriage would feel like in private. That was not how our family spoke. Information came in fragments, a sentence while bread was rising, a warning while laundry snapped on the line, a look between older women when a newly married couple was mentioned. The older I became, the more I understood that silence itself was part of the teaching. In our home, marriage was spoken of as a covenant. That word mattered. It meant permanence, responsibility, and a promise made not only to another person, but before God and the church. I was taught that a wife should respect her husband, care for the home, guard the peace of the family, and not embarrass him publicly. A husband was expected to provide, lead with steadiness, protect his family, and answer for the way he treated them. On paper, those duties sounded balanced. In real life, the balance depended on the character of the two people living them. My mother was not a woman who used many words when 3 would do. 2 weeks before my wedding, we were peeling apples at the kitchen table. There were 23 apples in the basket because I counted them just to keep my hands busy. The skins fell in long red curls into a chipped enamel bowl. Without looking at me, she said, "Marriage should make room for 2 souls, not erase one." Then she kept peeling. That was the clearest thing anyone told me. Other messages were less clear. I heard that a good wife should be agreeable. I heard that private matters should remain private. I heard that disagreements should be settled before they grew into bitterness. Those ideas can hold wisdom, but they can also become heavy when a young woman believes that being good means never disappointing anyone. I had spent years learning obedience as a virtue. Children obey parents. Church members respect ministers. Younger people listen to elders. By the time I reached adulthood, saying no could feel less like a normal boundary and more like a moral failure. That was the part I struggled with most. On the morning of my wedding, I woke before 5. The house was dark except for the stove fire and one lantern on the table. My sisters moved quietly around me, fastening pins and smoothing fabric. Outside, wagon wheels cut through soft mud left by the night rain. People began arriving before 7, bringing benches, food, and the low hum of conversation that fills a house before a serious day. By noon, I had stood through prayers, vows, meals, handshakes, and more eyes on me than I had ever felt at once. Everyone saw the public promise. No one saw the private fear that came after it. When the house finally grew quiet that night, I was tired enough to feel hollow. My husband was nervous, too. That surprised me. In my imagination, husbands entered marriage already knowing everything. He did not. He was an adult, but he had also grown up inside the same careful silence. We were 2 people expected to build a life together with only partial instructions. We talked for a long time, not about anything dramatic. We talked about the rain, about who had eaten too much pie, about whether the horse would settle in the new barn. Ordinary words made the room feel safer. Eventually, I told him I was afraid of failing him. I expected him to laugh or tell me not to be childish. Instead, he asked what I meant. That question changed the whole night. I told him that I had heard wives were supposed to be willing, peaceful, and accommodating. I told him I was afraid that hesitation would be judged as selfishness. I told him I did not know how to separate love from duty, because all the advice I had received had tied them together. He listened. Then he said that he did not want obedience from fear. He wanted honesty. That did not solve every difficulty in our marriage. It did, however, give us a place to begin. There are Amish homes where husbands and wives speak openly and treat each other with tenderness. There are also homes where authority is used harshly, just as there are in the world outside our community. The plain clothes do not make people automatically gentle. Faith does not remove human selfishness. Privacy can protect a marriage from gossip, but it can also trap someone when privacy is used to silence pain. I believe both truths must be said. For a long time, I thought a good marriage meant avoiding conflict. If my husband was tired, I tried not to add another concern. If I felt hurt, I waited for a better time. If I disagreed, I softened the words until sometimes the disagreement disappeared completely. From the outside, that could look peaceful. Inside me, it felt like stacking stones in a basket and carrying it everywhere. One winter evening, about a year after our wedding, the basket finally became too heavy. Snow had been falling since noon, and the windows were rimmed with ice. Supper was late because the stove was drawing poorly. A small disagreement about money turned into every unsaid thing I had carried for months. I did not shout. Amish women are often trained not to. I simply went quiet in a way that made the whole room cold. My husband looked at me and said, "You cannot ask me to understand words you never speak." He was right, so I spoke. Not perfectly, not calmly at every moment, but honestly. I told him that I needed the freedom to be tired, uncertain, or unwilling, without fearing that I had failed as a wife. I told him that respect had to travel in both directions. I told him that marriage vows did not turn one person into the owner of another person's conscience, body, or voice. Those were bold words for me then. They still feel important now. The lessons I received growing up were shaped by generations who valued endurance. Endurance kept farms alive through failed harvests. It carried families through illness, debt, and grief. It taught people not to abandon a promise at the first difficulty. There is something honorable in that. But endurance without honesty can become silent suffering, and suffering is not made holy simply because no one speaks of it. I have come to believe that marital faithfulness includes listening. It includes patience. It includes being able to say, "I am not comfortable, I need time," or "we need to talk." And knowing those words will be received with care. A loving husband should not measure his authority by how rarely his wife refuses him. A loving wife should not measure her goodness by how completely she disappears. This is not the way everyone in my community would explain marriage. Some would say I place too much emphasis on individual feelings. Some would worry that speaking so plainly weakens traditional roles. I understand that concern, because tradition gives many people structure and belonging. But a tradition is strongest when it can withstand an honest question. When I look back at that rainy wedding night, I do not remember it as a scandal or a secret. I remember two young adults sitting in a dim room, trying to be truthful after a lifetime of careful silence. We did not need perfect knowledge. We needed mutual kindness. We needed permission to speak. We needed to understand that love is not proven by fear. What I understand now is simple. Marriage should ask much of both people, but it should not require either person to surrender their dignity. Duty matters. Commitment matters. Sacrifice matters. Consent, tenderness, and honesty matter too. None of those things have to be enemies. My mother's sentence stayed with me all these years. Marriage should make room for two souls, not erase one. I think that is as plain and faithful a teaching as any I have received. Thank you for listening to a part of Amish life that is usually kept behind closed doors. I share these stories because quiet communities still contain real questions, real love, and real struggles. Subscribe if you want to hear more honest stories from my life, and tell me in the comments, what is one thing you believe every adult should understand before marriage?